Well, good afternoon, brothers and sisters in the Lord. I'm from Southern California, and I get up here, and it's just nice to know that we are united by more than a common interest. I get a chance sometimes to work with groups that are filled with atheists, and we come together and we dialogue, both atheists and believers, and they're all in the same room, right? And you get a chance to see how both these groups interact with each other. And there are some similarities, I think, but there are definitely some differences. One of the differences is that the atheist groups that come to dialogue with us, they are united by a common interest, but we're different than that, you and I. We're united by a common Father. And it's been very powerful to see that in this weekend of this conference. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm glad that Andy asked me, although I didn't realize he asked me so he could work me to the bone. I'm so exhausted. I got here on Thursday. I needed a green volunteer wrist. I think that's why I wanted a green wristband, because I felt like it was just a lot of fun to be here with him and setting everything up, and I really enjoyed it. And what a great list of speakers we've had so far. So I feel very honored to be part of that. All right. Now listen, sometimes when you go to these kinds of conferences, this is a very academic setting sometimes, and you get involved in taking great copious notes. I get that. It's going to be hard, I think, to keep up with some of the stuff we're going to kind of basically, again, I'm going to try to give you some information out of this fire hose. So what I've done is I provided that handout, that sign-up sheet back there on my email. And the reason why I've provided that to you is because on Tuesday, I'm going to email all of you a link. That link will give you a download so you can download some materials for today. So for example, one of those is going to be this article, which will talk about the chain of custody that we're going to talk about today, but in much more detail, about 5 times more detail than we're going to talk about today. So if you feel like, hey, you wanted to sit back and try to digest what we're going to talk about without having to take notes, you can do that, because I'm going to send it to you as a PDF file that you can download.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm also going to send this to you, the early dating of the Gospels, as another article, and I'm going to send you everything we've written on the reliability of Scripture as an ebook. So I think it'll help you make the case for the reliability, evidential reliability of the Scripture. I'm also going to send you a bunch of Bible inserts that make the case for the resurrection, for the reliability of the Old and New Testament. You can print these out. They're Bible-sized, so you can stick them in the back of your Bible. So when someone's got a question, you can pull them out and have a quick resource. And I'm also going to send you the early dating on one side and the New Testament chain of custody on the other. Just get over and sign up for it, and I will send it to you on Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll get back and kind of catch up. It used to be a lot easier when you're 21 than it is when you're 51 for some reason. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am, so you know something about me. Yes, I come from a long line of police officers. At some point in your career, you must grow this stupid mustache. It's very important. And you have a flat top. And that was the thing that was in 1989. I tell you, I was looking good in 89. Everyone looked like this. I was working gangs at the time. I came from a line of police officers. This was my dad. When he was in the academy, I was born in his academy. They used to make these guys wear tan when they were just recruits. And then once they graduated, they could go to wear the dark blue. And I kind of grew up with a guy who was a passive atheist. He would describe me as an angry atheist. But for the most part, my dad is still in that position. He doesn't believe that there is a God. It's okay with me believing it. It's a useful delusion. It gives me moral values. It's helped me raise my kids. But it's not something he believes. And I have really given him my best stuff, too. And he just doesn't, not quite there yet. He used to say to me, gosh, if I get sick at some point, then I'll start looking at that stuff again. Okay, he's had a stroke now. I'm thinking, how much sick do you need to get before it's going to be something you're going to want to look at? You're going to wake up dead one day. It's going to be too late to be looking at this stuff. He's 71 now. I'll show you another picture of him in a minute. But anyway, grew up with my dad. He was a big influence in my life. So there I am as a geeky teenager, 14 years old, in the Explorer Academy. There he is pinning my badge on. He wore that uniform pinning on my badge when I graduated as an adult. I was 27. And he pinned that badge on, and then he didn't wear that suit again, that uniform again. He retired the next day. And he didn't wear that suit, that uniform again until last December. He put it back on. All this time, I was working in patrol and gangs and SWAT and undercover position. That's me with my wonderful long hair when I was working undercover. I remember my kids, my son would have pictures. He's in kindergarten, and I'm working undercover, and I would go to his kindergarten open house, and all the kids would have pictures of their parents on the wall, right? Well, all the parents were waiting to see who this kid's parents were because he has 2 girls in his drawings. All his drawings always have 2 girls. I had a neighbor across the street from me, I swear to you, until I lived there for 4 years I was working undercover, and then I cut my hair, and then he talked to me. He didn't want to talk to me until I had my hair short. Anyway, during this time I was not a believer. I was working undercover when I first took seriously an examination of the scriptures. I really wasn't going to be a police officer, I didn't think. You know, my background was in the arts. I was very interested in the arts. I got a bachelor's degree in design. I did a lot of work in graphic and in industrial design, and then in interior design. And then I went on to UCLA and got a master's degree in architecture, which I call architorture, because that's what it felt like. And I just didn't feel like I fit into that group, you know. I was working in a firm in Santa Monica, a great firm, and thinking I was lucky to have this job, but I looked around, I didn't see anybody who was like me, trying to raise a family, and I had been with my wife since 1979, and we had been together at that time probably about 9 years, and I just didn't see anybody who fit. But my dad, he did raise 7 kids with this job, and I thought, well, you know what? Maybe it'll work for me too. So I went back and I got hired. And since then, I've no longer chased guys over fences because I'm too old. And I can remember when I was in training, I had a training officer about my age that I am now. We were chasing guys over backyards. He had just in a stolen car, and we lit him up, and we chased him for a while, and he crashed his car, and he got out, and he started to run, and he's going over fences, right? And I remember the guy I was working with was about my age, about 50, and we went over 2 fences, and I looked over him, and I said, hey, Bob, this guy's getting away, huh? And Bob said, yeah, he's getting away. We got a helicopter up. We did catch him in a perimeter, but still, you get to the point where if you're 50 in law enforcement, you're like 120 in dog years. There's no use for you. There isn't any use for you. And I try to stay in some kind of shape, but trust me, the guys who are bad guys, they're all in their 20s. It's a young man's game. So now I work investigations, and I get to work cold cases exclusively. I only work unsolved homicides. Now, you know, if you do a robbery, after a certain number of years, you can't prosecute a guy for doing a robbery. There's a statute of limitations. You get away with it for 5 or 7 years, depending on where you are. You don't get prosecuted for that. But if you do a murder, that stays open. That goes cold, but we can work it years later. My cases are anywhere from 1979 to 1984. Those are the cases I'm working right now. Now, as it turns out, my son got interested in this work. He's 23 now. And I get a chance now on the backside of this. I'm in this weird transition period. I've got 2 cases I need to finish. So I'm going to be faithful to those 2 cases. But I'm starting now to speak about this book and travel around a little bit. When I got saved, I thought, I want to be super Christian, right? Everyone in this room wants to be super Christian, don't we? We want to do the thing that really blesses God the most, that really is a testimony to our trust in God, to our faith in God. We want to be super Christian. So what do you do if you want to be super Christian? What's the first thing you do? Well, yes, of course, but I went to seminary. And so I graduated after about 7 years, because it's a little harder when you're working full-time. I graduated with a master's in theological studies, and I started pastoring. I youth pastored for a number of years, so my heart is in high school to college. And my kids were that age, too, at the time. And ended up planning a church, and now we are. But I get a chance to speak around the country. I'm grateful for that, grateful for today. And my son then went ahead and joined the department. So here we are. My dad is on the far side there. Whenever we go anywhere, my dad gets this thing where he says, hey, I see, people come up to me and he'll say, hey, I'm glad you brought your brother. Because I've been gray for years. I mean, I was gray when I was 30. And I'm glad you brought your brother. My dad will always stop them and say, oh, who's older? Between the 2 of us. So we have this chance now I was actually born in my dad's academy. My son was born in my academy. My son has my dad's name. I gave him the same name. And he got hired for the same agency 50 years to the month after my dad got hired for that agency. So I feel really God's been good to me. Now, along the way as teaching high schoolers and young adults, I became very interested in apologetics. Because I saw the first year I was teaching young people, the vast majority of them walked away from their faith as soon as they graduated my ministry. And that was really troubling. They were going to Berkeley, Sonoma, other universities where they were really challenged. So the very next year, I began to just share with them the evidence that brought me to faith. I'm thinking, why was I trying to be something I wasn't anyway? I think part of it was I was an old man, and I was feeling like I needed to try something to kind of fit in a young culture. So we had a very experiential first year. It was very music-driven, very media-driven, very artsy. And then the next year, we said, okay, enough's enough. And we started training our kids. We stopped teaching them. We started training them. By the way, teaching and training are two different things. Please stop teaching your kids. Start training your kids. Training is just teaching with a test. Boxers train because there's a fight coming. If they don't schedule a fight for that boxer, he'll get fat. But once you schedule the fight and the contract's signed, you start training for that fight. That's what we're doing in this room. But if we don't have a fight coming that's scheduled, we're all going to get fat. So it's important for us to take our young people out, to get them out. We go to Utah for a week. We witness to Mormons. We go to Berkeley for a week. We witness to Atheists. We're going to be doing an Islam trip at UCLA in about 3 weeks with Sean McDowell and Brett Kunkel from Stand to Reason. Plan events that force your young people to train to get ready for a battle that's coming. And you'll see the difference between training and teaching. Started a website where I just post all the stuff that I use to train my young people in several large categories. It's called pleaseconvinceme.com. We use Please Convince Me only because when I was in Utah, a lot of Christian apologists would carry signs around with their websites, and their websites are sometimes a little bit aggressive. And we didn't want an aggressive website. We wanted something that's going to say, hey, just please convince me this is true. And we got into a lot of conversations just by having this website up and running with Mormons. My dad remarried, and my stepmother is Mormon, and I have 6 brothers and sisters, all of whom are LDS. This also caused me to start another website called Answers for Atheists. These are not really answers for atheists. These are answers for you to give atheists when you're challenged. They're large concepts boiled down into 500 words or less. So every response here on this site in large categories of the problem of evil, problem of evidence, the existence of God, the reliability of Scripture, the deity of Christ, they're all broken down into 500-word responses. So I hope that'll be helpful to you. Let's get started today. Tonight I want to talk about the one lane I probably can run in with you tonight, because I've spent the last 24 years working in evidence. And evidence is an important thing to consider because evidence, for the most part, is under a debate by our friends who are atheists who challenge us. Look at what Dawkins says. Faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence. Faith is belief in spite of, even perhaps because of, the lack of evidence. This is the way the world around us sees our relationship to evidence. But for the arrogance of a religious person who just not only knows that there's a God, but that it's this God, the Christian God, the Trinity, the Virgin Mary, and they've got absolutely not a shred of evidence for any of it. That's arrogance. And that's bad enough that we get derided if people think we don't have any evidence for what we believe. That's bad enough. But I think we're starting to see since September 11 a subtle change in this, a subtle shift in this. And you see it here in these words. Hitchens is gone now. And in some ways I was an atheist till I was 35, and there's a lot in Hitchens that I admired. I used to feel like, I wish I would have been that good of an atheist when I was an atheist. Wish I could have been that clever. But this always stuck in my mind when he first said it. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And now the shift takes place. It's not just that we are stupid and believe things blindly and call that a virtue. It's that we actually are dangerous. We're We're dangerous because we are moving into the political realm and have always been in the political realm, and people like us should not be involved in running a nation. So you'll see that people who harbor strong convictions without evidence belong at the margins of our societies, not in our halls of power. And here we are in an election year, and Sam Harris says, I think he reflects the feelings of a lot of atheists about us, especially in a highly charged election year, right, where so many issues of faith are being addressed this year. And we're going to see a lot of it till the very end because there's not a single person running, well, maybe Newt Gingrich is the only one, who doesn't express some devout relationship to their faith. And finally, many of us saw religion as harmless nonsense. Beliefs might lack all supporting evidence, but we thought if people needed a crutch for consolation, where's the harm? September 11th changed all that. All of these are statements about evidence and the nature of evidence. And I think they're important for us to look at, to realize that the world around us, basically says, hey, if you want to believe this nonsense, and you might have some arguments, you guys went to this seminar today, and you guys have got some great stuff here. You talked about, is religion dangerous? Evidence from God for morality? Really? Evidence from morality? Come on, it's not really evidence, it's an argument. You might have some reasons, but trust me, you guys don't have any hard, direct, forensic, testable, empirical evidence. So if you want to hold on to these things, fine, but please don't say you hold on to them reasonably or evidentially because you don't have any evidence. So the question we really have is, and I'm glad I am kind of batting cleanup here tonight, is that you've heard a lot of arguments, a lot of reasons why you should believe, right? This week or this weekend? And the world around you that are skeptical, for the most part, would discount all of those. The question here becomes, what is it that we consider to be evidence? What counts as evidence? And all you guys have is circumstantial evidence. That's all you have. You don't have any testable, direct, forensic evidence. Well, that's why I want to help you think clearly about this, because the stuff you've been listening to this weekend has been related to evidence or reasons to believe based on cosmology, or reasons to believe based on the existence of moral truths, or reasons to believe in the reliability of Scripture or the deity of Christ. These are all things that we've been talking about this weekend. So my question is, are these things that are really truly evidence? Do these count as evidence? And if they do, how do we piece them together so that we understand what it is they teach and the power of this kind of evidence? So let me tell you what we do when we work cold cases. I think it'll help you kind of see through it. Cold cases are very distinct. When we investigate cold cases, we're investigating an event from the distant past, for which there really, for the most part, we know there's no living eyewitnesses. If there were living eyewitnesses who actually saw the murderer do this, it wouldn't be cold. And we have very little in the way of forensic evidence, right? Some of the forensic evidence has either been contaminated over time, or it never was taken, or the technology was such back in the day that they didn't even know they could take that kind of evidence. But each one of these cases can be discerned, it can be demonstrated circumstantially with a cumulative circumstantial case. Well, if you think about it, this is the nature of cold cases, but it's actually also the nature of the Christian world, and making a case for the Christian world, because just like any other cold case, this is an event from the distant past for which there are no living eyewitnesses and little or no forensic evidence. But we can make a case circumstantially with the evidence we do have. And if we understand the power of evidence, that case is really strong. So I want to talk a little bit tonight about the power of evidence to give you some confidence in what you believe and why. All these pieces you've been putting together, this large puzzle you've been assembling over the last few days in every one of our breakout sessions and every one of the main sessions, this is good stuff, and it is powerful. The first thing I need you to see the difference between is the difference between this word possible and another word. Whenever I get on the stand and a defense attorney says, Detective Wallace, isn't it possible that, okay, nothing good's going to come after that, okay? Because the next sentence out of his mouth, and I'm trying to be very careful because I know he just wants me to build a foundation, because so I build this foundation, the end's going to be over here, I'm going to be stuck in something he believes. So I have to be very careful about what I bite on, right? So isn't it possible that, and he'll say X, isn't it possible that X, and this is a ridiculous notion he's just throwing out there, but he wants the jury to at least hear the detectives say that it's possible. So we have to be very careful to distinguish between what's possible and what's reasonable. because possible does not count. Reasonable is the only thing that counts. In a court of law, possible does not count. Only reasonable counts. It's not beyond any possible doubt as the standard of proof. It's beyond any reasonable doubt. Possible does not matter. Let me explain to you why. Look, anything is possible. It's possible we're not even here right now. It's possible we were kidnapped by aliens, okay? And we were sucked up into their ship. And now this is an elaborate mind experiment where they've, basically got us thinking we're here in this conference, and tomorrow we're going to wake up and realize this is all a dream. Is that possible? Honestly, is it possible? You have to say yes. But is it reasonable? No. And that's the difference we're talking about here. So when someone says to me, Detective Wallace, isn't it possible X? I say yes, but it's not reasonable. Strike that last part of the sentence, please, Your Honor, because I don't want that last part in. All that matters in a court of law is this standard of reasonable. Now, why that matters is we're going to talk a little bit about reasonable, by the way, is the inference from evidence. Let me give you an example of a case I had. A husband killed his wife for about $50,000 in his retirement that he did not want her to get. He had a big retirement, but she managed to talk her attorney into writing the sales contract on their house so that when they sold the house, she was going to get an extra $50,000 off the top. So it wouldn't be a matter of having to argue with her husband later. She was just going to get it. And when he heard about it on a Thursday, he had a gun he had bought prior to that. He went over to her house on Friday and shot her in the head. And when we got to trial, of course, the defense attorney wanted to make it sound like, isn't it possible this could have been a burglary that got interrupted? She walked in on a burglar and maybe the burglar killed her. Well, is there any evidence of a burglary? Is there any forced entry? No. We had no evidence to support the idea that there was a burglary. Do we have any evidence that this is a neighborhood that is prone to burglaries? No. Any other burglaries in the neighborhood in the last couple of months? No. Then you can't consider it. Is it possible a burglar did it? Yes. But to consider that in a jury deliberation is called speculation. You can't do that. You can only consider those things for which there is evidence. And the reasonable inference from evidence is all that matters to a jury. So while it's possible it's a burglary, you can't consider that unless you've got some evidence to support it, and we didn't. Let me test you all right now and see how good you would be on a jury, okay? I'm going to swear you all in right now. Everyone raise your right hand. Raise it. You're not going to get to play if you don't raise your hand. Okay, everyone's in? Do you swear to be a good juror tonight? Absolutely. Okay, if you didn't raise your hand, you cannot say a word through the rest of this little part of the presentation, okay? Let me show you a crime, and then I'll put you on the jury to decide if our suspect, our defendant, is guilty. Let's imagine that this young man is going to go bludgeon a young woman in the neighborhood with that bat. And as he's running out of the house with the bloody bat, he is observed by a witness. And the witness looks and can identify him right now. As a matter of fact, this witness knows this guy. She can name him by name. He actually lives in the neighborhood of the victim. As a matter of fact, she says, I know it was him. I've known that guy since he was like 5. He was wearing the shirt I gave him for Christmas last year. I'll never forget it because I remember that pattern was hard to find. I kind of thought he would like it. It's like a lumberjack looking thing. So I bought him this shirt, and I think he looks good in that shirt, but I'll be darned if I didn't see him run out of the house carrying that bat with that shirt I gave him on. Okay. If you had that one witness in your case, would that be compelling to you that he's our guy? I think it'd be pretty compelling. That is one of the truest forms, perhaps the only form of what's really called direct evidence, because this woman can testify directly to the issue of his guilt, directly because she saw him do it. If she had actually seen him do it through the open glass window of the victim's house and had seen him clubber to death, you'd really be compelled, wouldn't you? She not only saw him running, she saw him doing it. I would think that would be pretty good evidence. That would be direct evidence. I've never had a case with direct evidence. Never. I've never had a case that was a DNA hit. I've never had a case that's been assisted by a DNA hit of any kind. My cases have always been 100% circumstantial. And we've never lost. You can make cases circumstantially that are convincing. And at some point, those who are watching the case and seeing the evidence kind of add up, they get it. I'm going to give you an example of this. Let's pretend, for example, that this guy, when he did the crime, was smart enough to mask himself. So let's put a mask on his head. Now when he's seen by the witness can say, yeah, it kind of is the same size and shape as so-and-so. And boy, it sure looks like he's wearing a shirt that I gave to him, but I really couldn't identify him. I didn't see his face. He was covered. I don't have any direct evidence now. But I still want to work this guy. So tell you what I'll do. I'll go out and I'll interview him. And when I interview him, I find out that when I ask him about the time during the murder, he can't account for his time. And then he changes his story twice. And finally, he gives me an account of his time that when I check it out, it's a lie. He is not doing what he said he was doing at the time of the murder. Got a guy who resembles the basic physical weight and size, got a shirt similar to the one that was given by the witness, and he can't account for his time. How many of you on the jury right now say he's guilty? Raise your hand. Oh, good. I need you on my juries. But the rest of you are thinking, no, it's not enough, right? Let's go one more step. Can you tell we're going to go a few more steps here? I do a search warrant on his house, and I find he's got a baseball bat about the same size and shape as a baseball bat seen in the crime. But, it's baseball bats are baseball bats. Everyone's got one of those. But his is all dinged up on the bat, like it's not been used to hit baseballs, but used to do something else. And I think, hey, let's do a little forensic test on this. And we test it for the presence of blood. No blood on the bat, but we discover it's been bleached. Dented bat that's been bleached. Can't account for his time, matches the general description. How many of you would convict him now? A few more. Hanging, you got a hanging jury up here. I'm going to get juries up here. I'm going to get all my trials moved to Vancouver area right away. How about this? I do the search warrant on his house, and I discover he's got a pair of Levi's. The suspect was seen wearing Levi's, but when I test the Levi's, there's no blood on the Levi's. But in 2 locations, just about the knee size, I see it's been spot cleaned with something. So it lights up when I luminol the pants, I luminesce the pants, but it's cleaning detergent. It looks like I got a pair of spot clean pants. A bleached bat. He can't account for his time, matches the description. How many more of you would convict now? Raise your hand. Not all of you yet, though. Let's add this. There's no sign of forced entry on the house. No sign of forced entry. Whoever did this crime got into the house without even having to, he had a way to get in. Turns out only 2 people had a key to the house. The victim's mother and my guy. Had a way to get in the house, has spot clean pants, has a bleached bat, can't account for his time, matches physical description. How many say, everyone, give me a whole vote. How many say he's guilty? Okay, now we're getting over the top. How many say he's not guilty? Raise your hand. Be honest. It's okay. Be honest. Because I got a lot of black screen here I got to fill up. Do the interview, and boy, he's nervous. He is so nervous when I talk to him about her. He's evasive. He doesn't want to use any kind of personal pronouns that unite the 2 of them. He wants to talk about her always in third person. Does not want, he's clear. And he breaks down at one point when I start to talk to him about any past relationship he might have had with her. Emotional, wants to distance himself from her, has a way to get in the house, has spot clean pants, a bleached bat, can't account for his time, and fits the general description. How many still say, I can't convict? Raise your hand. It's okay, I got a few. That's fair. I want you to be over the top convinced. No forensic evidence yet, do we? We have no DNA putting him at the crime scene. We have no direct evidence of a witness. All we have are these quirky circumstantial things. Turns out the witness says that she saw him wear a pair of boots. They were an unusual pair of boots. They had a big leather stripe up the side. You do a little investigation, you find out those are very unusual boots. Only about 600 pairs were ever even made. Nobody liked them. Nobody bought them. You do a search warrant on his house, you discover he's got a pair of those boots. Of the 600 made, only about 40 were ever sold anywhere near the location of the crime. He's got one of the 40 pairs. Unusual pair of boots. He's edgy about his interview. You see the whole thing. Who now would convict? I still has a problem convicting. Who says, I still think he's innocent? Raise your hand. You just want to see the rest of the black screen, huh? Okay, I'm going to do that for you. At the search warrant also we discover a note. It's a note that he is writing. It's a suicide note. He is despondent. It's dated the day of the murder. He's remiss about what he's done, but doesn't say what he's done. He doesn't confess in this note. He's just deeply, tragically, he's done something and he wants to kill himself, but he doesn't actually kill himself. We actually do the search warrant and get him in custody before he kills himself. He's despondent on the day That's a lot. We've added a lot to this. Now, how many of you now feel like you could say, think about this for a second. He's suicidal on the day of the murder. He's got the 1 in 40 boots. He's nervous in his interview. Got one of 2 keys possible to him. He's got bleached bat and spot clean pants. Who says now they really don't think he's guilty? Raise your hand. Still got a few. Okay, how about I'm going to add one more piece. Just one more. The witness says when he was driving away, she saw him get in a 1972 ochre-colored Carmen Ghia. Yeah. She liked Volkswagens when she was younger. She knows what a Carmen Ghia is. It was a 1972 ochre-colored Carmen Ghia. You do a little research, there's like 2 Carmen Ghias on the planet. I don't know if they're ochre or not, but you raised up the garage door on his house, and what does he have? Oh, ochre-colored 1972 Carmen Ghia. How many of you here really now at this point think it's reasonable that he's innocent of this, given the fact that, and by the way, let me add one more dimension for you. He's despondent in that note, and he has had a relationship with her that ends about a week before the murder. That's why he's so despondent. So you got a guy who's got a relationship with her, is despondent on the day of the murder. He spot cleaned his pants afterwards. He's got a bleached bat. He can't account for his time. He's lied to you about where he was during that time. He's in one of the cars, one car in the county, one car in the state that matches the car the suspect was driving. He's got it. Is there anybody here who says at this point he's not guilty? Now that's good to know, because I would keep you off my jury. Right? Do a little vetting of the jury before we actually see the panel. So you see how we've used circumstantial evidence to make a case. Now, I think it's possible for us to say, and it's reasonable for us to say, that his innocence may be possible, but it's not reasonable. And that's all that matters here. The standard of proof, the SOP, is reasonable doubt. We've assembled a case here, 100% circumstantial, by surrounding him with all the elements that have to be explained somehow. It turns out all of these things can be explained by his guilt or by a number of other things. You might pick one out and say, well, isn't it possible he was just bleaching his bat because, whatever. You can find some reason to. But one explanation solves the puzzle completely. One explanation actually accounts for all the evidence in the room. If he's guilty, he's either the most unlucky person on the planet, or he's the guy who killed her. He's one of those 2 things, right? And the most reasonable conclusion is that he's not unlucky, he's guilty. You've surrounded him in this evidence. This is a good circumstantial case. If I had 50 pieces like this rather than 6 or 7 or 8, would it be that much more powerful? The more cumulative a circumstantial case is, the more powerful that case is. We'll come to the reason why this is important in a second. Now look, when you go to trial, judges will tell the jury that they are not to look at circumstantial evidence and look down their nose at it. They are not to look at circumstantial evidence and say it's less than direct evidence. It has the exact same weight in a court of law. The exact same weight. As a matter of fact, in some ways, circumstantial evidence is better than direct evidence. Circumstantial evidence can't lie to you. Witnesses can. We're going to talk about that in the Christian worldview in a minute. Circumstantial evidence is what it is. You infer from what it is what actually happened. It can't lie to you. It can't deceive you. Witnesses can do that. So in many ways, circumstantial evidence is really powerful evidence.